Good morning, everybody. It is I, Jeff Darling, coming to you for your Week 9 recap, your Week 10 preview. Your host, dweller of the basement of the standings, and your commissioner. In that order, maybe. Coming to you. So let's go ahead and get on into it, because my kids are next to me, and it's only a matter of time before someone needs something from me. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Now, as if on cue. It's okay. That's how I felt. That's how I felt Monday night and most of Sunday. I know. Look at you. Look at you. Look at you. You're too pretty to cry on camera. Yeah. And there we go. All right, so that's how I felt most of the day, because I was just getting blown out of the water by Mike, who was on a 3-game losing streak. This was my chance. This was my chance. The projections were always in his favor, but it wasn't so bad. And then, golly, Derrick Henry. This dude is just averaging, I think, 23 points a week. 23 a week. That's the third of my score in most weeks. He didn't disappoint. 23 from Josh Allen, 26.8 from Derrick Henry. Devonta Smith was 16. And then what the killer was this guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba. Jackson Smith-Njigba, who had scored 2.9. He did have an 18. 5, 9, 11, 7, 3, 9. Like, this guy's averaging, it says now averaging 11 points. Prior to his Sunday performance, your head is huge looking. He was averaging maybe like 6 or 7 points a week. And then he decides to have Puka Nacua go and punch a dude in the face in the first quarter, who I started in my other league, by the way. Great decision. I benched Zay Flowers instead of that. But that's a different league, a different issue, and a different loss. Same loss, same outcome. But this dude, Jackson Smith-Njigba, goes and gets 7 catches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns, most of which came by the fourth quarter in overtime. Gets him 34.5 points. If it wasn't for that, and what a random start too, because, well, you know why it wasn't random? Mike Evans and Chris Godwin on IR. So some teams this year have a crippling injury, and they're left with peanuts on the bench. Mike was left with a peanut, but that peanut blossomed into a giant Reese's cup and just demolished me. Now, here's the thing. I went into my Monday night game down, I think, by like 50 points. And I had left DeAndre Hopkins and Baker Mayfield. And for a moment, I had glimmers of hope. Baker doing his Baker thing, DeAndre Hopkins having his best game of the year. They got me. Trying to do math on the fly, 42 points. And I lost 130.3 to 140.3. Mike was the only team that I could have played and lost to last week. And that's just how my season has gone. And that's just how fantasy is. You know, you've got a decent team, but it comes down to who are you playing against. And I played against the only team that, and that loss brought me to a 1% chance to make the playoffs. There's still hope, but not a lot. But maybe I could win the loser's bracket. Probably not. As long as I don't have to do this calendar. Although, guys, if Paul is the loser, who has not won, by the way, spoiler alert for his recap, I don't know if we can get Paul to make good on this, because he wasn't present when we agreed to the punishment. So we'll have to think about that. So, secretly hoping that Brandon loses out for the rest of the season and that Paul wins 2 more games. And then Brandon has to grace us with a wonderful calendar as the punishment. I think that would be best case scenario as far as that goes. All right, moving right along. The next recap, or the next matchup we had was Team Touchdown taking on Gone Fishin'. Gone Fishin' is probably greatly regretting the Achon trade. Montgomery got you, what did he get you? 11 points, but you weren't able to play Debo because he was out. And CeeDee Lamb got me a decent amount of points. even though they were terrible for me. Did he get me points? Yeah, you got me 12. I mean, that's whatever. But Achon, we'll get to Sean in a bit. Anyways, but Matt, it didn't matter. You won 131.1. I would have beat you by 0.2. I wish I'd played you that week. But no, everything's lined up terribly. Dan, you lost to Matt. You have to sit in that this week. Okay, 113 to 131. Congratulations, Matt. Next up, we had a slightly above average team taking on the way below average ChatGB Lee, who only was able to put up 65 points. Would have beat you, Brandon. Slightly above average, 23. I would have beat you, Jason, but that's okay. Looking at the matchups here, Brandon, you have way too many people that are getting you less than 2 points. You should do something about that. But I mean, I'm looking at your bench. It's about the same thing there. Don't know what happened, but I feel bad for you. Next up, we had the Weasel taking on my last year, 130.1. Would have beat you too, Greg. Would have beat you as well by 0.2. That's weird. We had two teams, 130.1. Jason or Greg and... Oh, 131.1. Okay. Wait, 131. Oh, I would have lost to you, Matt. Okay, there's two teams I would have lost to. Fake news. So, my fault. Okay, anyways, Greg handily beating the Weasel 130.1 to 88.84. And the Weasel, not a lot on his bench either. I think Paul's going to say he's just very focused on getting Chick-fil-A open back up. And I don't think any of us are complaining about that. Took another L. Congratulations, Greg. Then we had Team Queen taking on the Overachiever, and Team Queen had been riding high, I think on a 5-game win streak or something. The Overachiever has been overachieving all year long, continued the trend. Hannah, you left Zay Flowers on the bench. You swapped him out for A.J. Brown of the Eagles, or, yeah. And you would have won. You would have won because you left 30 points on the bench. But how are you supposed to know? How are you supposed to know? That was, I think, Zay Flowers the last few weeks. What's he been doing? Well, 16 last week, and then 3, but then 18 and 16. So maybe you should have known better. But you can't, every Queen's reign ends. But congratulations, Michael, for that victory. Then we had Hawk 2 and No More taking on Creature. And Sean, why couldn't I have played you that week? It was a nail-biter between the basement and the attic right here. But Sean squeaked it out, 93.66 to 90.7. Carlos, you did a valiant effort. We were all rooting for you, except for, sorry, Sean. But people hate the people at the top, right? So that means everyone must love me. Doesn't seem like it based on that chat, Greg. All right, well, anyways, that's the recap. So let's take a look at our standings. After 9 games, Creatures at 8-1, riding a 7-game winning streak. Team Touchdown did lose, but he's at 7-2, slightly above average, is on a 2-game win streak at 6-3. Greg is at 5-4. Matt is at 4-5, having won 2 in a row, increasing his playoff odds. Oh baby, I've lost 2 in a row again. Back on that streak. 2-7 for yours truly. Then in the West, we've got Mike breaking his losing streak at 7-2. Michael, 4 games in a row at 7-2. Hannah lost, but is at 5-4. Carlos at 2-7. Brandon 1-8. Paul 0-9. Now let's take a look at our playoff percentages. Right now, it's looking like, Sean's a 99% lock. Dan's a 96% lock. Mike is a 94. Michael's a 94, Mike's a 90% lock, Jason at 78, Greg at 63% chance, and Hannah with a 60% chance. Everyone else, Matt at 19%, and then you've got Brandon, Carlos, Weasel, and myself, 1% chance to make the playoffs. So it's looking like 4 of us are not making the playoffs. I think half the league makes it, if I remember correctly. 6 teams make it, 6 don't, so it's going to be pretty crazy going into the last few weeks here. So let's just take a quick look here at our matchups for the coming week. Thank you, Naomi. That's always very helpful. All right, our matchups. I'm taking on Carlos. Oh, one of us gets our third win of the year. That'll be nice. Right now, I don't think Carlos has touched his lineup. I'm projected 105 to 75. Don't touch your lineup, Carlos. Let me get this one, please. Then Matt taking on Jason, projected right now 118 to 90. Oh, we could go back to my Who Needs It More segment that we started last week. So Carlos and Jeff, who needs it more? I need it more, Carlos, but it's probably a toss-up. You've had some pretty disastrous losses, but after last week, we both lost. kind of nail biters, but very unfortunate things. I'm just going to go biased and say I need it more. Then we've got Gone Fishing taking on slightly above average team. Who needs it more? Matt needs it more as he's fighting for the playoffs. Jason is in a somewhat comfortable position, but right now projected to lose to Matt 118 to 98. Next up, Chat GB Lee and the Weasel. Who needs it more? The Weasel needs it more because we want Brandon to do that calendar. Right now, the projection is 111 to 84 in favor of the Weasel. Can Paul get his first win of the season? Doubtful. But can Brandon get his second win of the season? Even more doubtful. We're all just watching that one with bated breath. All right, next up, we've got Greg taking on the Queen. Former co-workers, now current enemies. Greg right now projected 122 to 113. Who needs it more? It's equal. You both need it more. Both at 5 and 4. Both fighting for the playoffs. That one's a toss-up. I'm going to go familial obligations and say that Hannah needs it more because, Greg, if it's your last year, what does it matter? Don't quit. You need to come back. This league would not be the same without you, right? She'll start crying more. All right, next up, the Overachiever taking on Creature. A 7 and 2 against an 8 and 1. Right now projected Sean 123 again with the 120s averages. This is getting old. Michael projected 116. Who needs it more? Michael needs it more because the whole league needs it more because the whole league needs Sean to lose. Or needs you to win out for the rest of the season and then lose in the first round, Sean. Maybe that would be even better. All right, next up, the last matchup, Team Midnight taking on Team Touch Dan. Both teams at 7 and 2. Who needs it more? I don't know. That's kind of a toss-up as well. But right now it's projected Dan 105 to Mike's 93. I think Mike needs it more just because Michael's coming on his tails to try to get the first place away from him. And Dan, let's face it, you're not going to catch Sean in first place in our division. So who needs it more? Mike needs it more. Or maybe Dan needs it more. Either way, you both need it, and you're both 7 and 2, so I don't care about either of you. All right, you need to stop crying and just have a good time. All right. Thank you guys for your attention. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk to you later. Check your lineups.